This is the Big Stories Podcast, where we tell the amazing and inspiring stories from across the Big 12 Conference.
Welcome to a post-Labor Day edition of the Big Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Cleon Wall. We are coming to you from the House of Wall today, or at least the back porch of the House of Wall, so you might hear some interesting things in the background, like leaf blowers, lawn mowers, a lawn edger or two. Might even hear a passing car. We spare no expense in studio quality on this Labor Day weekend. Every team in the Big 12 has played at least one game, and while all of them count in the standings, there were some storylines which will be everlasting after week one. Okay, everlasting sounds a bit much, since in 1 to 2 years' time, I'll probably forget almost everything we talk about today. Maybe that's because of age or other things I put in my memory bank. But at least I'll have this podcast to listen back to with my addled old brain and say, oh yeah, that did happen in the Big 12. Most of our week one storylines deal with quarterbacks, so let's start with number 5. By the way, we should get a guy or a girl with a great voice to do the countdown for us each week, because me saying number 5 isn't as good as someone saying number 5. Yeah, we're going to have to work on that one. Anyway, number 5. In our storylines preview before the season, PHNX Sun Devils podcast host Anthony Totri said the key to this season was QB Sam Leavitt and wide receiver Jordan Tyson. They were the stars of the show in the Sun Devils' 38-19 win over the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks. But how about Leavitt's legs? 2 touchdown runs. One was for 52 yards, the other for 18 yards. Right now, Leavitt is tied as the leading rusher on the team with 73 yards. He also had 257 yards passing and a couple of TDs. Jordan Tyson caught both touchdowns and had 141 yards receiving. We shall see if Leavitt's legs return this weekend when ASU plays at Mississippi State. All right, on to number 4. While teams like Arizona State, Iowa State, and BYU had their way with FCS teams, that was not the case for Kansas State. They were down 21-17 at the half to North Dakota, and down again 35-31 with 4 minutes left in the game before an Avery Johnson to Joe Jackson TD rescued the game. I was not expecting to talk to Drew Galloway of the KSO Show podcast for the second week in a row, but when the Wildcats struggled against an FCS opponent, I figured we needed to talk to him again. What is going on in Manhattan? I'm sure the Wildcats are glad to pull out the victory, but this victory seems a bit troubling, at least from my vantage point.
Yeah, it is a little bit troubling. It's something that was kind of talked about at various points of the offseason, kind of digging into what has happened post-Ireland for a lot of teams that have gone over there. And it seems like the biggest consensus was there's going to be one game where the team, no matter if you won or lost, isn't going to play very well post-Ireland trip. And it's happened to pretty much every team. You could argue that Florida State, that happened like every single game post-Ireland, but like Georgia Tech, even after winning, kind of laid an egg at Syracuse later on in the season in week 3. You don't know if it's going to happen the next game or the game after. I think that the goal and the hope now, since K-State found a way to still win, is that is kind of like what just happened to K-State on Saturdays. Like that was kind of, I think everybody's kind of dubbed it like the Irish hangover. I saw a lot of people talk about like never wanting to, if you wanted like a reason to not want to go to Ireland as a team, it is like that Irish hangover because you don't know when it's going to come. And I think that kind of came last week for K-State. I mean, Chris Kleiman had his press conference already this week saying that he already thinks that this week is going to be better because they get to practice today and Tuesday, where like last week they didn't practice until Wednesday, just kind of getting everybody back up to speed. So I think the goal is that was just kind of like the Irish hangover.
By the numbers, the offense looked fine. Is there something that the numbers are not telling us, though?
I think that what the numbers aren't telling us is how poor the offensive line has played. If you just look at the raw numbers, Avery Johnson has barely been sacked through 2 games, but they can't run the ball right now and run effectively. And I think the number where the numbers really don't show it with the offensive line is just how many offensive linemen are playing because they can't find a good group of five. I think Saturday, the first 5 drives, K-State had 5 different combinations along the offensive line because they couldn't find a 5 that were getting a consistent push or ways to move the ball effectively. So I think that's probably what the numbers aren't showing.
Was there a breakdown defensively? I mean, I'm not saying that you can't have good FCS teams that can score 31 points on an FBS team, but was there something in there that just didn't look right when it came to the defense? Or again, are we going to go back to, hey, we just didn't have as much practice time because we played in Ireland?
Yeah, I think that you're hoping that it was just not being able to practice, but there was issues in eye discipline, some over pursuit issues. And some of that you hope is that it is just not having a lot of practice time last week, spending a lot of time in the lead up on Iowa State, having a new scheme and a new quarterback play from North Dakota last week could also be something that you could really point towards with that. But I think that there was a lot of breakdowns defensively, and especially, weirdly enough, K-State has been one of the best in the Big 12 against the run since Chris Kleiman took over. And they were getting pushed around. They were over pursuing. The defensive ends had a really tough time in the run game against North Dakota. So you're hoping that, again, that's just kind of the practice time, maybe not even being like super focused on North Dakota because you just lost a tough game in Ireland against a conference rival. But that's something that you got to fix this upcoming week, because if you aren't disciplined and you aren't looking in the correct spot, Army is going to score a touchdown, because that's just how their offense is all predicated on making the other team really be disciplined for 60 minutes.
Hey, everyone out there, make sure you go check out the KSO Show podcast. Drew Galloway is one of the hosts. Drew, thanks for joining us here on Big Stories.
Yeah, thank you.
Moving on to number 3, there were quarterbacks who started their games but didn't finish because of injuries. Oklahoma State lost Haas Haney with a broken bone in his left foot. He's now had surgery. Bad news, since the redshirt freshman is fast and threw a TD before leaving the game in the Pokes' 27-7 win over UT Martin. Texas Tech QB Baron Morton limped off the field in Lubbock. Coach Joey McGuire said he twisted his ankle and has muscle soreness. We'll see if he plays against Kent State. And then there was UCF's Cam Fancher. Joining us now from the Sons of UCF podcast is Adam Eaton. Give us a health update on Cam Fancher.
Yeah, don't know much right now. He got dinged up on Thursday against Jack State. Took a pretty nasty hit to that kind of head or neck area. Did not come back out once the weather delay subsided for the Knights. Post-game, Scott Frost said a bit of a back injury, and Fancher had some shooting pains down his legs. At his Monday press availability, Frost said that he's still not quite sure what Fancher's status will be, that he's still a little bit tender from that hit, and that he'll be able to monitor throughout the week. So right now, still a big question mark in the air, but obviously not playing the second half, and seeing what Taven Jackson did. I'll be curious to see what Scott Frost decides to do with Cam Fancher in this upcoming game against North Carolina A&T.
How did Cam look before he was replaced by Taven Jackson?
Yeah, I'd say he was steady is probably the word I would use, which probably isn't the word you want to use to describe your quarterback. But, he didn't really do anything that you grabbed your head and said, oh, my goodness, what a great play. But he also didn't do anything where it was catastrophic. There was one fumble, but I don't think that was caused by him as much as the receiver. So I think he was okay. I think the offense in general, though, was just – the word I used was constipated. It just didn't look like it knew what to do. It looked like it was kind of very sluggish. Again, a lot of new players coming at the same time. So it's really hard to kind of strictly call all that out to Cam Fancher. But the offense certainly did not look great in the first 3 quarters. Really picked up in Q4 once Taven Jackson got a rhythm. But I would say kind of uneven for Cam Fancher. So it's really tough to judge his 27-play performance. If you want to judge it based on results, UCF did not score. Had some really tough drives there. So I would say uneven. And I'm curious again to find out if he gets another opportunity to get back on the field and kind of prove what kind of quarterback he can be for the Knights.
Well, you talked about Taven Jackson coming into the game and finding a rhythm. He was 17 for 24 in the game. He throws 2 TD passes, including the game winner. How does that quarterback competition look going forward? And the only reason I say that is because you mentioned to us in a season preview how Scott Frost wanted this quarterback competition, and he starts off with Cam Fancher, but Taven Jackson comes in, and I guess you could say he looked pretty decent in that week 1 win.
Well, I'll say a couple things. First, I mean, Scott Frost has been very steadfast in his belief that he can win with all 3 quarterbacks who are in that competition. So Cam Fancher, Taven Jackson, and Jakari Brown, who we have not mentioned yet. Frost said repeatedly he felt like he could win with all 3 of those quarterbacks. Fancher gets the start, and I think it was surprising to a lot of Knights fans, but what you heard was Fancher had a better command of the offense, was a little bit more consistent, didn't make any of the kind of catastrophic mistakes that Frost wants to not have in his offense, and so that's what kind of got him the nod. But I found it curious in Monday's press availability. Scott Frost said that after that announcement, he kind of saw that lit a fire under Taven Jackson. He saw him kind of take that news and really go in and prepare. And so Frost essentially said perhaps not getting named the starter was what it took Taven Jackson to maybe kind of snap out of it, for lack of better terms, and really kind of take the reins of this offense. So, perhaps that's maybe what Frost was looking for, to see who really wanted to take this offense. But here's the thing I would tell everybody out there is UCF schedule sets up in a really interesting way. Jack State was the first game. Now they have North Carolina A&T coming up this Saturday. Then they have a bye week. Then they welcome in the Fighting Bill Belichick's of North Carolina on the 20th of September. I have a feeling this competition will probably go up until that September 20th game. And you may see a couple of quarterbacks play on the next game here against North Carolina A&T. And so I think Frost wants this competition to continue. He has said repeatedly he wants someone to go out there and take this job. He did not want to just give it to somebody. He wanted somebody to take this job. And based on what you saw from Taven Jackson late in that game on Thursday against Jack State, I think that's the kind of performance that Scott Frost would say, this shows me somebody who wants to have this job. Now, will that happen? We'll see. But I think Frost is very comfortable with this competition continuing forward, and I would not be surprised at all if you don't see 2 quarterbacks play Saturday against North Carolina A&T.
Another big storyline is coaches returning to the teams they've coached previously. I'm sure Coach Frost would have loved to have won the game more convincingly and had his QB healthy at the end of the game, but at least he won. His first run was magical, not far from the Magic Kingdom. Can he be magical again in his second run now that the Knights are in the Big 12?
I think you have to, kind of qualify your definition of magical, right? The 2017 team that a lot of folks, around UCF continue to talk about was a different time and place in college football. UCF was in the American Conference back then, not in the Big 12 like they are now. There wasn't a college football playoff of 12 teams like there is today. And so I think you have to qualify what magical looks like. Can he be successful? Can he find some of the same keys and tools that he used the first time around to get to Orlando? I think he can. I think it'll take a little bit of a different path than it took the first time around because of the differences I talked about. Again, NIL wasn't a thing in 2017. Rev share wasn't a thing in 2017. So a lot of outside forces and circumstances have changed from then to now. So if you say magical, sure. If that magical means, competing for a conference championship game berth, maybe get into a big, sort of bowl berth, I think that is within the realm of possibility for UCF. I think, look, they're still a ways away from that. As much as people want to hope that Frost can just plug right back in and pick up where he left off in 2017, things have changed too much for that to be a reality. So I think we're a couple of seasons away from maybe that happening. But yeah, I think there can be some magic again. It just won't be the same magic I think Knights fans were used to the first time around.
Adam Eaton from the Sons of UCF, thanks a lot for joining us on Big Stories.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Rich Rodriguez also won in his return to WVU. The native from the Mountaineer State coached West Virginia to a 45-3 victory over Robert Morris. Number 2 and number 1 are the same themes. Big 12 teams taking on other Power 4 programs. Over the weekend, the Big 12 was 1-3. And I will say they went 1-1 in the 2 biggest games. At number 2, Baylor bows down to Auburn at home, 38-24. Ashley Hodge from the Sic'em 365 network now joins us. Ashley, in your season preview, you said Dave Aranda took over play calling duties on defense, and he talked about the great linebacking core he had. So how did he allow the Tigers QB, Jackson Arnold, to run all over the Bears and give up 38 points?
It's a great question. I think a lot of the fans were questioning why he was playing 2 safeties so deep because, he had a couple safeties off 20 yards off the line of scrimmage. So maybe the linebackers were overrated. maybe they're not as bad as they looked against Auburn, but when you play your safety so far off the line of scrimmage, maybe it's hard to tell. I think they really felt the safety position was a weakness. Perhaps one theory is because Baylor's wide receivers have been so good in fall camp, and they did a pretty good job against Auburn. But clearly stopping the run was not a strength, and that's got to get better quick, or Baylor's going to be in for a long season.
Well, the passing attack didn't have a problem against Auburn. Sawyer Robertson put up big numbers, but the running attack, what's going on with the Bears' running attack right now?
Yeah, well, I think it was partly game situation. They got down 14-3 early in the first quarter, so they had to pass the ball a lot more than they wanted to. They thought that was going to be a strength. It was definitely a strength at the end of last year. They have a lot of returning offensive linemen, but I think Auburn's got, a legit defensive line. They spent a lot of money in the transfer portal on those defensive linemen. So perhaps that's the best defensive line Baylor will see all year. Time will tell. We'll see as the schedule unfolds, but they've got some weaknesses to shore up. But one thing that was a positive is that they did move the ball through the air pretty efficiently.
Bears are at SMU this weekend. Scary time for Sawyer Robertson and the boys, or are you feeling pretty good going into game 2?
No, I'm not feeling good. I think, it's SMU is beatable. They're replacing 9 starters on defense, I believe. They have an outstanding defense coordinator, Scott Simons, who I know pretty well. But he's a guy that, I think's going to, certainly, mix things up and give, Baylor some new looks defensively. But I think it's the first team to 40 wins. It's going to be an offensive shootout, in my opinion. And I'm expecting a lot of points. Unlike the BYU SMU game last year in Dallas, I think this one's going to be a high scoring one.
Ashley, I know that you're going to be paying attention to the TCU North Carolina game tonight. So just so people out there know, this is happening during that time. I'm going to let you get back to the game, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for asking me who I'm not rooting for.
Yep.
Have a good.
Thanks a lot, Ashley. And at number 1, the Utah Utes crush UCLA 43-10. I was going to get Josh Furlong of KSL.com to break it down for us, but he decided to stay in California and vacation with his family. We'll catch up with him in the near future. In the flurry of college football's first full weekend, I will tell you that Utah looked legit. Kyle Whittingham said Utah's offensive line was one of the best he's coached, and he may be right. Utah was efficient, marching up and down the field for their first 3 touchdowns. They just bullied the Bruins. I think the rest of the Big 12 was put on alert early by that performance. The other 2 Power 4 matchups included Georgia Tech beating the Buffaloes at Colorado and Cincinnati losing a neutral field game against Nebraska in Kansas City 20-13, with one notable Bearcat alum in attendance. Oh, and his fiance was there too. I think her name's Taylor Swift. By the way, with our Swiftie report, we turn to my daughter, Felice Wall. Initial thoughts on how the engagement went down.
It's just so exciting. I'm so happy for her. Oh my gosh, can we talk about the floral for a minute? Like, all the roses were just absolutely stunning in it.
You're talking about the flowers in the background.
Yes, I am. They're just, they're gorgeous.
My daughter likes flowers, and she's taking a flower design class right now. Okay, so you talked about the background. What about the engagement ring?
The engagement ring is stunning. It is a beautiful, like almost oval shaped with gold around the edges. It's beautiful. I've heard it's vintage, but I don't have sources to prove that.
I think you need better sources. How will the nuptials between Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift boost the Cincinnati Bearcats football program?
I'm not sure, but I mean...
Wait. Time out here. Do you know that Travis Kelce is an alum of the University of Cincinnati?
Yes, I did know that. My real thought on this is Taylor put Travis on the map, and she's doing the same with their football team.
Okay, last question for you. Taylor found her football player. If you were to find your football player, who would that be?
Honest answer?
And that's going to wrap it up for the Swiftie Report. from correspondent Felice Wall. We'll see if she rejoins the podcast in the near future. The game Ashley Hodge was watching, TCU and North Carolina, went final while this podcast was being recorded. The Horned Frogs spit in the eyes of the Tar Heels. Final score, TCU 48, North Carolina 14. Bill Belichick, one of the greatest pro football coaches of our generation, is now 0-1, while TCU reminds the Big 12 they know how to move the ball up and down the field. All right, our big man on campus this weekend. I almost want to give it to Iowa State quarterback Rocco Becht again, as he only had one incompletion in the Cyclones' 55-7 win over South Dakota. He was 19 for 20 for 278 yards and 3 touchdowns in the game. I could give it to the whole Texas Tech QB room. They were 25 for 32 for 314 yards and 6 touchdowns. But I'm going to give it to new Utah QB Devin Dampier, who had 206 yards through the air and 2 passing TDs. He also led the team in rushing with 87 yards and another touchdown. Best woman on campus? I'm just going to give it to Arizona, BYU, Colorado, Houston, UCF, Utah, West Virginia, Arizona State, Iowa State, and Kansas State's volleyball programs. They all started off the season undefeated over Labor Day weekend. It may not be that way in the next few weeks, so enjoy it now, ladies. That's going to do it for this edition of Big Stories. Make sure you catch our second episode this week as we feature former Kansas fullback / tight end Jared Casey. He walked onto the Jayhawks football team and has one of the more iconic catches in the team's history. That episode will drop on Thursday before Kansas renews their rivalry with Missouri. For all of us on the Big Stories podcast, I'm Cleon Wall. We will be back soon. Oh, and Big Stories is a production of BYU Radio.